Very nice to see you, Mr. Worden.
Yes.
Thank you for answering some questions. What do you think of when you see the moon in the sky now?
I don't really think much about the moon anymore. You have to remember it's 48 years ago. And in my mind, it's a little like going to a movie. And then when you come out, you're back in the real world and you think about the movie. And as time goes on, many of the things about the movie become kind of in the background. But you remember the high points of the movie. And I think years later, you still remember some of those. And the moon's the same way. I don't think much about the moon. I don't call up images of specific things that I saw on the moon, but some of the larger features and some of the absolutely incredible features there are on the moon keep coming back to mind. And it's not like it's fresh in my mind, but my memory is pretty good when it comes to certain things on the moon. But looking at the moon up in the sky at night, I don't think much about it anymore.
Having been the person who was furthest removed from any other human, what lessons could you offer to the people who are going to travel to Mars and on further journeys for their distance from humanity?
Well, my response to that is patience, patience, patience. It was wonderful being by myself there for 3 days. I was very happy to fly that spacecraft by myself while they were down on the surface. I did a lot of work. I only slept about 4 hours a night. Had a lot of science, a lot of photography to do, a lot of visual observations to make. You know, one of the visual observations that I made resulted in NASA changing the landing site for Apollo 17 to go to a spot that I had picked out, which I thought was kind of neat. We were looking. The moon is an interesting thing. It's very, very old. It's the same age as the Earth. In fact, it probably came out of the Earth. I think that's what they're beginning to think more and more. So it went through a cooling period, just like the Earth did. It developed a mantle, but there was still some volcanic activity. And my job was to sort out the volcanic features from the meteor impact features and try and provide some context for that. There are several. In fact, the area where we landed had the rill. The rill itself is an old lava flow that came down from the mountain and carved out a trench in the surface. Any linear feature on the moon is called a rill. And the one that we landed, that Dave and Jim landed next to, was what we call a collapsed lava tube. And a long linear. The difference between the gravity on Earth and the gravity on the moon is pretty spectacular. Lava tube here on Earth would be 35, 40 feet in diameter, but on the moon it was 700 feet across. And that's probably due to the difference in gravity. So there's some pretty spectacular features on the moon. Being isolated and that Guinness record of being the most isolated man in history, I can't verify. I don't know. They say that there was at a point where I was further away from the guys on the surface than anybody else. I don't know. That could be.
Do you ever yearn for that peace again?
Oh yeah, I liked the peace and quiet that I had when I was by myself, even though I had a lot to do. But it was a lot easier to get things done without two other guys getting in the way. So I quite enjoyed the time by myself. Had a good time.
Have your feelings for or about our planet today changed from those you had when you looked at Earth from a long, long way away?
Not so much about the Earth. The Earth is a pretty finite piece of material stuck in solar orbit. It hasn't changed in billions of years. I had a greater reaction to looking at the universe the other way because I think that's quite a bit more spectacular. When you look at the universe through the atmosphere, you see a certain number of stars. Stars that are dimmer, let's say, or less bright, get absorbed in the atmosphere and you don't see them. So there's a limited number of stars that you can see through the atmosphere. But when you're around the moon, in a part of the orbit where you're shadowed from both the sun and the earth, you see them all. There's nothing to attenuate the light coming in. And so what I saw was a sheet of light, not an individual star, which I found absolutely amazing. And it made me think more about our place in the universe than just looking at the Earth. If you just look at the Earth, you're kind of restricted to just the solar system. But if you look at the universe out there and you realize how far away those stars are, and you realize how many of them there are, then you get a little different perspective on what this is all about.
Did you feel very small?
Oh yeah, and it's absolutely unbelievable. If you look in the night sky and you look at the Milky Way galaxy, it's a wash of light, and you see individual stars and all that. But I don't think very many of us realize how many stars there are in the Milky Way. And there's like 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and then you find out that there are another couple 100 billion galaxies out there that we see as points of light because they're so far away. But they're probably about the same size as the Milky Way. So you start multiplying all those numbers out, and you get to a number that nobody can comprehend. But you realize that the probability of planetary systems around stars the size of the sun is going to be a positive number. And there's going to be a positive number of those planets around those stars that are going to be Earth-like. They'll have an atmosphere, have water, and all the things we need for life. So it becomes pretty inescapable if you really look at the universe out there and you really contemplate what it's all about. That there's going to be a planet out there with people living on it like us. And if you read Carl Sagan, he's very clear in making the statement that there's absolutely no question in his mind anyway that there are intelligent people living out there. But you have to understand that depending on the size of the planet they live on, they're going to be different from us. If the planet is smaller and less gravity, they're going to grow tall and thin. If the planet that they live on is higher gravity than what we have, they're probably going to be shorter and thicker and more muscular. So we are a function of our heritage, but we're also a function of the environment in which we live. And the Earth has a certain specific gravity which makes us what we are today. If the gravity were different, we'd look different.
Well, talking of education, as you know, the Stephen Hawking Foundation is funding space camps for young children in English schools, particularly north of England at the moment, and we want to take it out much further than that. What message would you have for 8, 9, 10-year-old children who are going off to space camps and they dream of travelling into space and learning about space? What message would you give to them?
Well, I think for young people, they need to turn that dream of going into space into something concrete in terms of education. If they're really serious about going into space, they need to be prepared for it. I am a proponent of STEM education, and I believe that the age group that needs that motivation is in middle school, not high school and not college, because once they get to college, they already know what they want to do. So I believe that we need to focus on those kids, the 8 to 12 group, or maybe a little more. And the more we can get them into something like Space Camp, the more we're going to get them thinking about STEM courses, because they're going to realize that the only way we can go into space is through science, technology, and engineering. And hopefully that will turn a lot of these students into STEM students later on. And I believe that's critical for the Western world. In the United States, we graduate every year about 10% of the engineers that China does. And that does not bode well for us unless we can get more students into the STEM courses. And that tide is beginning to turn. It was over the past 8 years in our country, we really slipped into the liberal social side of things. And so the hard courses, the math and engineering and science courses, were taking a back seat to the liberal courses like political science and that kind of thing. And I think we can see that that's beginning to turn around. And to me, that's a hopeful sign. I like to tell young students, it's great to think about going into space, but you will never find an attorney who can build a spacecraft. Okay? So if you're an attorney or an accountant or a doctor or anything like that, political scientist, you're not going to be the one to build a spacecraft. It's going to be those who have engineering and science degrees that are going to do that. So it's important to focus on the science and engineering when you're young.
I've got to ask you about one more thing.
Sure.
Might be a bit of a touchy subject, stamps.
It's what it is.
We created these stamps for the Isle of Man Post Office, and we worked with George Abbey over at Johnson Space Centre.
You work with George Abbey, senior or junior?
Senior.
Okay, good man.
Yeah.
Very good man.
He wrote the text for the issue, and he gave us a tour around Johnson Space Centre with Mark Geyer and took us into mission control while they were operating the International Space Station, which was amazing fun. And Roman's dad, Chris.
So you met Mark and...
Yeah, met Mark. And
he's also a good man.
And he introduced us
I haven't seen any director of the Johnson Space Center that kind of measures up to what we had back in the day with Bob Gilruth. He was our father figure. He was everything. But I like Mark. I just don't know him very well. He's a new guy in the job.
Well, Gilruth ended up on one of our stamps because in the stamps we've got the Apollo mission and mission control.
I saw that, yeah. Do you have Max Faget on any of them?
Yes, we do.
Good.
And George was insistent that name had to go on.
George knows. Yeah.
One of them, we slightly broke the rules. We've got 3 names on each stamp, but Faget is there just on this one here.
You got Kraft, Faget, Lowe, and Phillips. Those are the 4 biggies.
What do you think of the stamps?
I love the stamps. I think they're great. I hope they do well.
I think they will. There's another set possibly coming out next year. Well, we hope.
What's going to happen with these stamps?
Well, these have been released now. The Isle of Man Post Office, so they're used in the Isle of Man. They go out to collectors around the world as well. We're sending them out to people who are involved in the missions. But they're used as part of the postage for the Isle of Man, so people will be using these stamps right now. The Isle of Man sends post out around the world for lots of companies.
Does a percentage of that come back to the Hawking Foundation?
Well, we hope so. Isn't that a great idea? I'll put that to Maxine. And
well, see, that happened back in the States a long time ago when they had license plates for Challenger. And that was a great source of income for the Astronaut Memorial Foundation for a while. It's kind of tapered off now. But that was their basic source of income for a long time. And so it worked. But that was license plates. Stamps, I think, would be even better because more people will go after a stamp than they will after a license plate.
I agree. And we've got a set coming out next year. This is one small step, leads up to Apollo 12, and then the next set, Apollo 13 through to 17. Clearly you were on one of them. I think we discussed earlier on while my sister was being
15,
born. Yeah. And then we're going to look at Skylab, the Space Shuttle, and the International Space Station.
Okay.
Is there anything else that we should have put in there? If you were to pick something that you think absolutely must be on a stamp anywhere through the Apollo program, what would it be?
The only thing I can think of is it would be nice to honor the large dish radio telescopes, because that's where the SETI program.
Yes.
I think is a very future looking program. It's quite an operation today. Lots and lots of radio telescopes out there, and I think that see, we talk about the space program, but we're really talking in the past. Everything you've got here is in the past. Yeah. The future, where we are right now, is we're just doing a lot of talking. And maybe in 5 years we'll go back to the moon, maybe we won't. But all during that time, we've had radio telescopes out there searching for signs of extraterrestrial life. And I think that might be something that you want to think about.
I think 15 years ago on my PC, I had a little program running 24/7, the SETI program analyzing data.
I worked at the research center, NASA Research Center, that started the SETI program out at Ames Research in California. And from a very small start, I think they've become pretty important. But, it keeps making me think about stories like Contact that Carl Sagan wrote about reaching out there. And they did that by first picking up a radio signal from outer space. And I think that's probably going to happen someday.
So we need a third set, which would be After International Space Station, then leading on to the Falcon Heavy and all the other commercial ones they're setting up. But
yeah,
looking out.
they are. They are. I think Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are much more visionary than even the people in NASA are. I think the problem is that people in NASA are tied to a budget, they're tied to oversight, they're tied to congressional review, they're tied to a lot of things. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos can have a dream and go after it, and nobody can stop them. So there's a chance that they could do a lot of things before the government does. I hope Elon Musk can do what he's trying. He's got this Star Hopper thing that he's building now. That's down in South Texas. He's not going to launch that from Kennedy Space Center. Jeff Bezos has a couple of launch sites also, one out I think in New Mexico, and they're both going to launch from the Cape. I've seen the Blue Origin building at the Cape, and it's the largest building now at the Cape. They're going to completely build their spacecraft and everything right there. To me, the most exciting thing going on in the UK today is reaction engine.
Yes.
To me, that's exciting. I happen to have the opportunity to go to reaction engines when the day that Alan Bond retired and say hello and talk to them and see what they were doing. And I was very excited about what they're trying to do. It's going to be a very complicated project, but they've already tested the engine at supersonic speed. So let's hope that it works.
That's another thing that should be on a stamp then. So
I would think reaction engine is the biggest thing that England's got going for it right now. I believe. There are some space programs, but if we could ever get to horizontal takeoff to orbit, that will absolutely revolutionize space travel.
Spaceport Cornwall, that's one of the big questions for them.
Yep. I think that's going to be wonderful if they can put that together.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
it's been great to meet you.